Hi, this is Dr. Jabali, and in this video, we're gonna go over some IB past papers related to the topic 4.4. So this is basically just the multiple choice. We're gonna make sure to look at some of the global warming questions, and it's extremely important that the first thing you do is read the question at least 3 times, and make sure to read the 4 options. Do not go straight to the answer, moving on, unless it's like just one word. But when it's sentence, it's very important that you read a couple times because there's tricks in the words, and sometimes you might see that there's 2 options that are very close to each other. They're very true, right? But one is more specific. So let's go ahead and read the question. It says here, what contributes to the rising atmospheric concentration of carbon dioxide? So basically they're saying they're increasing CO2 in the atmosphere. That's what they're saying. And increases the average global temperature. And because of that, there is an increase in temperature. So they're saying what it makes the CO2 rise, and with that leading to a high temperature. So let's see here. An increase in the shorter wavelength radiation emitted by the Earth, an increase in the longer wavelength radiation emitted by the Earth, an increase in the combustion of fossilized organic matter, depletion of the ozone in the stratosphere. So these are the 4 options they have here. I'm going to erase again so I can give you a little clear. Now, they're saying what makes increase the CO2 in the atmosphere. And once again, it's just about increasing the CO2 and increasing the average temperature. So the first thing we think about, it's an increase in shorter wavelength radiation emitted by the Earth. First of all, shorter wavelength is released by the sun, not by the Earth. So the first one is off. An increase in longer wavelength of radiation emitted by the Earth. This is something that students will try to answer because they think, if the Earth absorbs the longer wave, that means higher the temperature. That is true, right? Because the CO2 will absorb the longer wave goes. So they will answer this, but like I said, read the other answers. Here says an increase in combustion of fossilized organic matter. So that means when you have a fuel or a fossil and it reacts with oxygen, it releases CO2 into the air, right? So this is known as combustion. So every time you increase the amount of combustion, what are you doing to the amount of CO2? You're rising, which that leads to this, which leads to that. So C can also be the answer. And then D, depletion of ozone, has nothing to do with this topic. So we only have 2, B and C. So many students go ahead and so quickly respond to B, say, that's that for sure, because I know for sure the long wavelength increases the temperature. Yeah, but it says what contributes to the rise of the atmospheric concentration of CO2. See, the longer wavelength does not increase CO2, but it is the combustion that increases CO2, and when you have a lot of CO2, it will eventually lead to the temperature. So the first cause is this one, which that means the combustion. So the right answer is C and not B. This is the reason why I keep telling students, don't fall on the first answer quickly. Read them all. Next, which characteristics of water vapor classifies it as a greenhouse gas? Now, what makes a water vapor a greenhouse gas? So let's look. It absorbs and then re-emits some of the long-wave radiation emitted by the Earth's surface. Some students will question, say, but this is true, there's long wave in the middle. So we just put it in the side as a question mark. Here it says it prevents short-wave radiation from reaching the Earth's surface. This is the first thing it does not do, right? Because we know that the sun always release the short wave, and no matter what, it always will hit the Earth, no matter what, the short wave. So it's not B. It absorbs the UV radiation but does not re-emit. That's another one that student says, maybe it does absorb the UV radiation, so I don't know. Or students will say, I don't know what's UV radiation, so put it as a side. And then it says it absorbs infrared radiation but does not re-emit. So then students are stuck between these 3, right? I don't know if it's UV, I don't know if it's infrared, and then here I don't know if he absorbs and then re-emits some of the long radiation by the Earth's surface. This is where students get stuck. Now, here is the most important thing, is that in the whole process, they do re-emit. So it does not re-emit, that's not it. It does not re-emit, it does not it. So it's none of these. So it's for sure this one, it is A. So it does absorb and then re-emit some of the long radiation emitted by the Earth's surface. That would have been the right answer to say that water vapor is greenhouse gas. because it does remit in the end. So moving on to the next. Here says, which mechanism do greenhouse gases contribute to global warming? So what about the greenhouses? What do they do in order to cause the global warming? The higher concentration absorbs more long-wave radiation coming from the sun. So just saying the word here, long-wave coming from the sun, is already wrong. Because once again, reminding you, the sun sends the short wave, it hits the earth, and then the earth is the one that sends the long wave. Okay? So if you're going to say anything about emitting long wave, it should be the earth, not the sun. Here says the short wave radiation emitted from the earth. Short wave is not the earth, it's the sun, so B is off. They absorb higher amounts of long wave radiation emitted from the earth surface as their concentration increases. That makes more sense. And here they absorb higher amount of short wave. No, again. See, because the greenhouse gases, right? What do? They absorb only the long wave. They do not absorb the short wave. So it's all about the long ones. So that's why D is off. So the only answer is C. So remember, once again, greenhouse gases is all about absorbing the long waves. And they're coming from the earth, not from the sun. Moving to the next question. Here it says deforestation and agricultural activities, including production of crops and livestock, are thought to play a major role in the greenhouse effect. The graph shows an annual trend of rates of deforestation and the production of soybean cattle in the state of Mato Grosso in Brazil of the period of 2000 to 2010. So first, understand that the word deforestation here means, let me write here, deforestation. It basically means cut the tree, right? So they're cutting the trees. And then we talk about agricultural activities. That means making crops. That means we're producing beans, corns, whatever it is that they're going to do. And the production crops and livestock. When I say the word livestock, we're talking about cows, sheep, whatever they're doing. So here in the graph, what do we have? One side, we're showing the annual production, right? And here we have the years. And then here we have the rate of deforestation. As you can see, this is the rate of deforestation. And then we have the soybeans, which are a circle. The triangles are the cattle, which means the cows. And deforestation is the square, which is the trees. So looking at this graph, you can see that deforestation in 2001 start rising. As 2003, there's more deforestation. And then with 2005, it drops deforestation, and then rise deforestation again, and then it drops. And then you can see with the soybeans, for instance, that 2001 all the way to 2009, there's a rise and there's a little bit of drop and then a rise again. And then you can see for the cattle, it has a slight increase going from 2001 to 2009. So we have looked at it, understand a bit. Now let's go straight to the questions, or should I say the options answers. What conclusion can be drawn from the information in this graph? The first one says the decline rates of deforestation led to an increase in production of CO2. So let's see. If we decline the rates of deforestation, so that means in this case, let's see, right here. What about here? There's a decline of deforestation, right? Is it going down? There was an increase in production of CO2. Now, production of CO2 in this case would have been the cattle releasing, the fart, methane, which turns to CO2. And the soybean, in this case, no, there was a little bit of drop here. So that means you weren't taking the soybeans out. So there isn't this increased production of CO2 because there's not much change going on here in this area of the soybean, the cattle. So I don't think A will be following it through. Just let me erase here so you can see clearly what I'm trying to say here. So they're saying decline here, right? As well as a decline here. But in these two declines, there should be a massive increase in cattle because increasing cattle will increase production CO2. But it's not true. You can see there is a steady place for the cattle. That means the cows that release methane that turns into CO2. And here also the production of soybean has decreased, so not much. So I don't think A will be the answer. B, soybean production accounted for the greater proportion of deforestation than cattle production. Now, looking at this, the soybean as well as the cattle, they're both walking almost in the same direction of lines. So I don't think that there is a greater proportion of soybean compared to the cattle. I don't think so. And you can see there on the graph, right? They're very close to each other. The lines here are very close in line. So they're usually on the same area between 1 and 2. So now, unless there was a drastic change. So I want to say B. Now, the forest habitat declined during the first few years of the study. Now, in the first few years of the study, there was a decline in the forest? Yes, you can see there was a decline here in the beginning of it. That is true. In the line here, it says, okay, let me show you. Forest here declined, that means there was less trees, right? So the deforestation did happen to be in the beginning. You can see there was an increase in deforestation, which that means the forest did decline. So C most likely to be it. And then here, decline in the rates of deforestation is due to increase in soybean production. That is not true, because you can see more production here, right? As there is a decline in deforestation. So that does not make sense. So the only answer here is C. C can only be the one, because this is the only one that makes sense, in the sense that you can see that here, when there's a increase in the deforestation, that means there's less forest, and that's exactly what it says here. Forests have declined, and that's because in the first few years, which is the first few years, there was deforestation. There was a little bit more deforestation. The other ones, they're not confirmed. You can see there's not much of that gap going on. And that's pretty much it for this one. So let's look at this one. It says, which gases have made the most significant contribution to the global warming? Now, the most common ones are water and carbon dioxide. This is fact. If you did study 4.4, it says it actually says in one of the understandings, it clearly says there, the carbon dioxide, water are the ones the most impact, while methane and nitrous oxide, they come in second. So if you don't remember this, obviously we can cancel ozone, because ozone is never mentioned topic 4. Between methane, we know the carbon dioxide is the only one that can be there for sure. So we get rid of these. So then you'll be stuck between these two. See, but we know there's a lot more water in the earth than there is methane. So definitely water will be the one picked. So the answer is A, water and carbon dioxide. Moving to the next question here. It says, several greenhouse gases occur in the atmosphere. Carbon dioxide is one of them, but so are methane and oxide nitrogens. Now, why are the oxide nitrogens classed as greenhouse gases? So then you got to go and figure out again what is the property of greenhouse gases. These are the ones who absorb the long wave radiations. First, they say here, they trap some long wave radiation emitted by the Earth. That makes sense. They prevent shortwave radiation from reaching the Earth's surface. That's not true. The short wave will always come to Earth no matter what. They dissolve in rainwater to produce acid rain. No, they don't dissolve. That's not true. They are only produced by human activity, where CO2 and methane are also produced naturally. That's not true. We do produce CO2 all the time. So when they say they are only produced by human activity, that is not true. Okay, you can produce other places too. So that's not right. So the only answer is A. Now here says global warming threatens the survival of the Arctic foxes, right? Now, which of the following factors could be involved? So when we think about global warming, here's the most important thing. When we talk about global warming, most likely this will lead to a high temperature. And high temperature, what does it do? It will melt areas of the Arctic, and that means it will be loss of habitat. And not only will you lose the habitat, that means loss of food. So if there's loss of food, what's going to happen to these foxes? These foxes are going to compete with each other for food, right? So that means competition with other foxes is spreading north. That's possible. The reduction in numbers of prey species for the Arctic foxes. That is also possible, right? Because there's less prey for them to eat, which is basically the food. And then decrease in the oxygen availability to the Arctic. Now, oxygen, it doesn't matter. If you can melt the Arctic, it doesn't mean that there will be less oxygen in the air. So this has nothing to do with it. So the only two answers will be 1 and 2, which is B. Remember, global warming is not affecting the oxygen. It's all about the CO2. Oxygen is not related whatsoever to global warming. And that's pretty much is the kind of multiple choice focus. And you can see that most of it is talking about the greenhouse gases and the greenhouse effect. if you understand the greenhouse effect and these gases, what they're doing, then most likely you're going to get all the answers for the questions when it comes to 4.4.